I work at AMD and Pradeep works at NVIDIA. And together we run the LLVM Social Bangalore meetup, which is the world's largest compiler meetup. And we're hosting this dev room. For our first talk today, we have under the hood the craftsmanship of creating high performance CLIs in Golang by Harini, who's an SDE for watsonx.data. And she's from the data and AI team at IBM. So welcome Harini, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Very good morning. I think, is this needed?
Yeah, because the voice
Okay.
will be recorded.
Whoops. Very good morning. I hope I'm audible to everybody in the back. Welcome to India FOSS. It's the 5th anniversary and the first session. So honestly, super excited to be here. So a quick introduction on me. I'm Harini, and I think Ashutosh did a good job. I'm just going to cover a few more things that might be useful in case you want to chat later. I'm an undergraduate researcher at UIUC in software engineering, an alum of summer schools in MIT and Oxford, and I'm a STEM representation advocate and an AI researcher. So enough about me, let's get into the talk, right? I kind of put this tweet out I think 2-3 weeks into my internship at IBM, and it was me learning Go for the first few weeks, and I was really happy that I sort of fixed this Go panic error. And cut to a few more weeks later, I was assigned a task which was to build a custom CLI in Golang to interact with Kubernetes resources for my business unit, and it was going to be used by 300 plus folks. So this was a quick sort of euphoria that I experienced because I was able to go from not having much experience to then building one in 4 weeks, right? So this isn't going to be a how to install Cobra talk. It's more about the ergonomics of a CLI. And the cool thing is, when you learn how to build one, you also learn that all these important tools like Terraform, Git, kubectl, you understand how these highly critical tools are designed. You get to go behind the hood, you understand the design principles that was taken in. So even if GUIs are still pretty popular, CLIs are fundamental for every developer. They automate a lot of workflows. They are mostly the first tool that you encounter when you're working at large enterprise systems. So let's begin with the Unix philosophy. I remember sharing this in one of my college community called HSP. They're all here, the largest one of FOSS in campus. I shared this article about Unix philosophy because here's the thing, these have very important core tenets, which we shall walk into. The first one, arguably the most important, is when you're designing commands, when you're designing a CLI, make sure that every single thing that you design does one thing and does it well, right? For example, grep, it just does one thing, it searches. And by just keeping it simple and organic in that sense, you are avoiding monolithic tools that try to do everything at once. The second tenet is making sure that you work together via text streams. So what this means is if you're able to chain the outputs via pipes, you're going to make it so much more easier to improve the accessibility when you're traversing across a huge code base. And the third important tenet of the Unix philosophy is keeping it simple and transparent. There's no guessing, there's no magic, there's no ambiguity in understanding what's happening with a specific command. So it's easy to parse or redirect. So again, one of the most underrated, I'd say, responsibilities while you're designing a CLI is how you name your commands. Because you're not making this just for yourself. What you're doing is making it for teams, for automations. So if they are not able to understand what it is supposed to do at one go, you're obviously making it too clever, right? So using a verb-first approach always helps. Using words like build, deploy, instead of, say, configure or validate, which brings in a lot more ambiguity and reduces the developer workflow, is something that you should keep in mind. So please avoid technical jargon in that sense. The second thing I learned was about consistency. So if I'm designing a command from scratch, I'd want it to behave the same way across all the other subcommands, right? Example here is verbose. So if I'm using it in one command, it should be able to implement and sort of behave the same way in every other command. And a technical tip that helped me was using shared flags that are put into a common function. and you apply them globally. So in that case, you're not missing any edge cases, and it keeps the interface consistent, right, and prevents any sort of duplication. The third thing is about discoverability. You might build the best CLI, but if it's not discoverable, it's not really useful. So you have to learn how to strike the balance between making it complex, but also intuitive, right? Especially in CI environments, not just by teams. You also use these CLIs in pipelines where, or when you're onboarding new members. So making sure you have a very clear help command, which is not just a boilerplate. It is more of a clear understanding of what that command does, what are the parameters needed, what are the flags needed, and maybe even some use cases helps, because there is no official documentation when you are working with large code bases. These kind of commands often become the help documentation, right? They replace it. Again, when we design CLIs, a common thing that we always miss is error handling. Because I think we all assume that we're able to build these without having any errors, or people are able to run it without encountering any errors, which is 99% not true. Which is why it's very important to avoid cryptic errors. If I'm getting an error that says exit status 1, I shouldn't be spending more time searching on Google or Overflow about what's happening, what does that mean. We want to keep it as fast as possible. So here is an example. You clearly see that there's a file not found, so the user knows that there's what has to be done. He has to change, or she has to change the path of the file, and that improves the actionability when you encounter an error message like that. Now, coming to the human design aspect of it, you have to understand that when we are designing CLIs, we're not designing it just for machines. We're designing it for real users, for real people on the other side. So understanding the UX is very important, understanding the context, the goals. So for my case, it was all about Kubernetes resources. So I had to sort of find the exact commands that would be most used, whether it's finding pods, whether it's scaling up things. All of that was kept in mind when you sort of design it, because you want to give developers fast feedback and a minimal setup. The command flow, again, is something that helps in designing it more cohesively. You have interactive modes of flags, which we will get into in a bit. Okay, so in your output, when you have a waterfall of logs come out, you realize that it's hard to manually find what you're looking for, and that often worsens the experience, right? So it's very important to not just dump raw output or the exact block of code unless the user specifically adds a debug flag, right? Here's an example of what a good output can look like. For example, if there's a validation that's failed, you want to indicate what's the required field that's missing. You want to indicate the format, and when you're also running these commands, when your commands are being trying to fetch things, right, or they're trying to fetch resources, if you're trying to scale up things, make sure the user is not waiting at a blank screen, because when there's no progress indicator, then the user is going to think that they don't know if it's actually running or if it's something that they have to set up. So have active spinners or active indicators that show that the command's being progressed. So there's a very lightweight library in Go called Spinner that does this. Coming into all the words that I was sort of using, for those who don't know, subcommands, arguments, and flags are the key USPs of Cobra, which is what I used to build my CLI. You need to sort of structure your commands hierarchically. And this might seem like an overkill initially if you're working with 5 or 6 commands. But when you start realizing that the CLI is growing with the complexity, having a very structured hierarchy is very important. You do not want to have a mess of random commands across, because that doesn't help in navigating what that CLI is supposed to really do. Coming to arguments, and here we'll focus specifically on positional arguments. There's a quick tip on how and when do you use arguments versus flags, right? A quick rule of thumb that I used is, if the value that that is being spoken about in picture is required, and it clearly identifies a primary source, then we use a positional argument, right? But if it's an optional parameter that sort of affects the behavior and can be passed in any order, then you use a flag. Coming to flags, so in Cobra, you have three kinds of flag scoping. You have local, persistent, and global. And the optional parameters sort of help in modifying the behavior. Some examples for you all to just quickly take a look at. And coming to config management, which is arguably one of the most important parts, you use Viper here, right? You might wonder why. So let's take a look at that. It's mainly because just like how Cobra and Go are the go-to config for building command line tools or command line interfaces, Viper is a similar de facto for that. When you're talking about logging, you want to have structured level logging, and packages like Zap or Logress are very useful. And you use Sprint only when you're trying to do some sort of quick, like rapid prototyping, right? Using interactive prompts also is very, you have built-in libraries like Survey that asks the users questions interactively. It kind of makes it easier for the user to like put in what they really want from that command or what are they trying to fetch. So keeping all of this in mind, when you're designing a CLI, you always have to make sure that the startup time is very low. You do not want to add heavy dependencies. Even if you're having a trade-off between user experience and speed, it's always better to first cater to speed and then move to user experience, because when your speed is slow, your user experience is automatically getting reduced, even if it has the best features. Coming to why Cobra is a great library, I think if you guys paid attention, you'd know. But in case we sort of want to summarize it, right? And also, you might have a question like, if Go already has a lot of inbuilt packages that does this, then why am I using Cobra? Why am I using something like separately? It's because you are trying to prevent reinventing the wheel again, and it also gives you full control. So it's a win-win situation. You're getting the same features, but you're also getting more autonomy in how you design your CLI. Features like automatic generation of help, built-in support for subcommands and flags, all of these added to the speed of development. In 4 weeks to develop a CLI from scratch isn't possible unless you make the best use of such features, right? Integration with Viper for config management and the command hierarchy. So I'm primarily a person who works in data and AI, and I wanted to see if I could like put that in somewhere here, mainly to see if it improves the user experience. Again, when I'm designing it, I'm trying to make it more, like useful for users. And I understood, and I think this was a good experiment to try incorporating NLP for better experience. So traditional CLIs require you to know the command by heart, or like you need to know exactly what to type in. No room for errors, no room for typos, no room for missing flags. And that again isn't the most cohesive experience. So when I looked into NLP, there were a lot of libraries that Go supported, which was fun, in case you guys want to take a look at. The use cases are when you want to suggest commands on typos, right? Instead of validate if I miss a letter, instead of me having an error that says, ask me to type it again, I can use fuzzy matching. And if I'm trying to sort of not know, if I'm not sure of what command, like when I started, I did not know a lot of things that were used in my enterprise environment. But if I could type in like, hey, I want to know if this contract is valid or if this pod is still running, and that automatically runs the command for that, then that would make the experience easier, right? So things like that, and even auto suggestions are really fun. So with a little NLP, my main point is that you can make the CLI more conversational and typo tolerant, which improves the experience and does not sacrifice any kind of Golang dependencies or any kind of power of the CLI. So in terms of going into the technical depth of how do you implement these, what are the packages that I need to look at, or the technical routes that I need to explore, you don't need a full LLM, right? Often that's the go-to approach of getting any kind of automation in, that you build an LLM from scratch. But here you have libraries like Pros or Go NLP itself, which do like basic tokenization, tagging, and you're able to like extract main keywords, and with some sort of Levishtian distance, you're able to implement the same features that I was talking about. So that's the main goal of this, and it does not replace the CLI syntax, which is again an important point. You can still type in the exact command. It sort of offers dual possibilities, right? It augments it. It makes it more human-friendly, which helps you make your CLI more high-performant. So these are some of the resources that I was talking about that you can check out once you have access to the slides. I'd say the documentation, of course, like every other tool, is the main thing. But there are some libraries that you should look into. And yeah, thank you so much. This is my QR. I picked this up from KubeCon. You usually put like a QR and you get to scan like the details. So if that helps, please let me know. And this is by Nano Banana, which is pretty cool. So yeah, have a good day and have a good time at the conference. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And thank you so much.
Please raise your hand if you have any questions. Yeah, good. We'll be arranging a few more chairs. Sorry for that.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the talk. It was like very good, quick summary how to build a CLI product. I have a question like, have you come across challenges related to running the CLI in multiple operating systems like Linux, Mac, Windows, and how did you tackle?
Right. So that's a good question. Again, Go has a Go packager. Am I audible? Oh, my bad. Yeah, Go has Go packager itself, which helps you deploy and like make the config for various different environments. But that's not often recommended. So when I was sort of putting this together for folks to install in their devices and laptops, I used a Go install, which will automatically install the latest version. Which is much easier to do than having separate Darwin files for these different environments. So again, Go packager is your solution for finding and exploring with that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Hi, that was a great talk. You suggested that we should place the command hierarchically.
Yep.
Can you give some example how or what should be done?
Right. So, for example, so in my CLI, I had get as my main command. I wanted to get like say pods. I wanted to get nodes. I wanted to get namespaces. Again, since this is a Kubernetes specific CLI. So what I did was I designed the main command get, and under that I had sub commands which would get these resources. So when I'm as a third person, when I'm installing a CLI, right? If I know like if I have to get like pods, I know that it will be under the get command itself. So you're making it more intuitive and like batching it according to the functionality it's offering.
Okay. And in terms of code sharing, the subcommands are completely different. They don't depend on get, or does they?
Depend on Git.
Get command.
Oh right.
Get
no,
pods.
they don't
Those are
depend.
completely.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? Excuse me.
Yeah, it was a very nice talk. You mentioned like while integrating NLP,
Yeah.
regarding integrating NLP with the CLI tool. So you mentioned using tokenization and word embeddings to find the closest command. What's your opinion on using an LLM API for the same task?
So that would also be an alternate approach, but I would sort of benchmark that approach with respect to maybe the speed and the lightweight part of it, what I'm talking about. So if it does like sort of give the same performance and has the same advantages, sure. And it might also like you could do a lot of things with that. If you're incorporating an API, you could even like experiment with MCP. So
Yeah, one thing I could think was if any error comes in the console, so you can just like feed it back to the LLM and get
Right.
a suitable like response.
So
something
in
like that.
enterprise environments, the usage of LLMs is sort of restricted.
Right, yeah.
But if you're doing like a toy project or a personal project, that would be like a great idea.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah? Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah? Okay, yeah, you can cut.